HarperCollins presents A Candle for Christmas and Other Stories by Reginald Hill, with foreword by Mick Herron. Read by Mike Rogers.
Foreword. First, let's run the numbers. Reginald Hill was the author of 24 novels in the Dalziel and Pascoe series, 5 Luton-based novels featuring former lathe operator turned private eye Joe Sixsmith, and 21 other novels of an extraordinarily high standard, their subjects ranging from British complicity in the murderous regime of Idi Amin to the hidden, sometimes heroic motives of French civilians accused of collaboration with the Nazis during the Second World War. From Masonic misdeeds involving the Royal Protection Service to the trauma of discovering that one's spouse is a spy and a traitor. All this and 4 collections of short stories. Such an abundant output that the writer adopted 3 pseudonyms to contain it. Clearly, if Reginald Hill hadn't existed, we'd have had to invent him.
Such a task, however, would have required the collaboration of any number of talents, drawing on knowledge of a wide range of material whose sources recognized no boundaries, least of all those separating literature from mere genre. As Hill wrote in 1986, I still recall with delight as a teenager making the earth-shaking discovery that many of the great, serious novelists, classical and modern, were as entertaining and interesting as the crime writers I already loved. But it took another decade of maturation to reverse the equation and understand that many of the crime writers I had decided to grow out of were still as interesting and entertaining as the serious novelists I now revered. It's clear, then, that Hill found sustenance and inspiration in both classical and popular fiction, and he delighted in constructing his fictions on foundations laid down by writers he admired. The partly epistolary A Cure for All Diseases was a continuation of sorts of Jane Austen's unfinished novel Sanditon, and when Hill co-opted Dorothy L. Sayers as a guiding light in Underworld, it wasn't her detective stories he turned to, but her translation of Dante's Inferno. That most bewilderingly prolific of creative artists, Anon, is also celebrated. Bones and Silence involves a cycle of that author's mystery plays, in which Andy Dalziel gets to play God in a more literal manner than usual. At the same time, Hill's thematic preoccupations refuse to fit genre tramlines. On Beulah Height, which many regard as his masterpiece, weaves a grim fairy tale entitled Nina and the Knicks into its essentially tragic plot. Arms and the Women includes Ellie Pascoe's retelling of the Iliad, or the Eliad as it's dubbed, with Dalziel in the Odysseus role. While The Wood Beyond was essentially a novel about the First World War, but set in the 1990s in mid-Yorkshire. There seemed, in fact, little Hill couldn't turn his playful pen to, or adapt into detective fiction. And without ever deliberately misinforming his readers, he took great delight in wrong-footing them, writing at least one novel in which he revealed the identity of the murderer in his opening words, though it would be an astute reader who picked up on this. At least one absorbing mystery novel in which no actual crime is committed. At least one in which the murderer gets away with it. And at least one in which his detectives fail to notice, let alone solve, a murder committed on their patch. At the same time, his novels provide a commentary on social change in Britain over the last quarter of the 20th century, and a little beyond, including, in Underworld, what remains one of the finest novels yet penned about the 1980s miners' strike. But imaginative as they are, these books would be much diminished if all they amounted to was a series of puzzles. It is, as every Hill reader knows, the characters who count, and his characters are bold and bright. At first glance, his leading pair are polar opposites. If Andy Dalziel's un-PC mindset provides plenty of belly laughs, and some uncomfortable tittering to accompany his blunt force brilliance, Peter Pascoe's more sensitive approach allows him to exercise compassion as well as deductive reasoning. Indeed, it's difficult to avoid the notion that, at least in his earliest incarnation, the university-educated, left-leaning, bleeding-heart liberal Pascoe was intended as a mouthpiece for the author's own opinions.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?